Hey, how's it going today, everyone? So, Capcom just dropped the Project Resistance teaser trailer, and I wanted to talk about it, mainly because it intrigued me, and I have noticed a lot of people show some concern about whether or not this game is actually going to be good, but I have some speculation or theory that what we saw with the teaser trailer is not really representative of what the actual game is going to be like, but I'll get into that later on in the video. That being all said, I do want to talk about some of the things that I noticed within the teaser trailer and some of the things I've also noticed as far as what Capcom mentioned about the game, and just a little promotional thing that might allude to who's in the game. But that being said, let's get right into this trailer breakdown. So right off the bat, we see some monitors and a bunch of other devices. We see a figure dressed in black walking towards those devices. The devices turn on and they show some of the characters that we're actually going to be seeing for the most part within this trailer. And right now, we're just not really sure what's going on, but we do know that whatever is happening within the events of this game, the characters that we're going to be playing as are being monitored by this unknown figure. So this next part, we see the unknown figure typing in some stuff. It seems like it triggers a timer, and on the monitor that, or at least one of the monitors that he is looking at, it says mission time, and then we get a first glimpse at the characters that we're going to be playing as within this game. Now, the thing that I find really interesting is that there is a mission time. It almost seemingly implies that this is going to be similar to Resident Evil Outbreak, where Resident Evil Outbreak, while it did not have mission times, it did feature an infection mechanic, and after you've reached 100%, you basically died and became a zombie. So perhaps this is going to be a similar situation where you have only 4 or 5 minutes to complete each of these missions, and then if you don't, you die and become a zombie, or you just fail the objective. Or I could just be looking too deep into it, and this could have something completely else in terms of what it's related to. It could be a story point. It could be something entirely just for the teaser trailer itself and not have anything to do with the actual game itself. Now, there's nothing of real significance in this particular portion, but I did want to divert your attention to right above the Tyrant test tube. Right above there, it seems like there is a monitoring room, which further implicates that the characters that we are going to be playing as are going to be monitored as they progress through whatever facility or area that they're going to be going through within the game. So here at this point, we're seeing more monitors focusing on the characters via the cameras, and the cameras are also numbered, which is something that I forgot to point out. And the character who's looking at these monitors is flipping some switches, and things are happening while these characters are progressing through these rooms. Lights are going off, this proximity mine is being armed, and it seems like there's a general preparation for something that's coming. I also want to point out the fact that while we do not know who the character is that is sitting behind the monitors and flipping these switches, it does give me some vibes of Albert Wesker, because at one point Wesker did wear black leather gloves with a suit and sat behind monitors, and this is something that was very prevalent in Resident Evil 4, and something that really doesn't help this game's case, because what happened slightly earlier before the trailer actually dropped was that Tokyo Marui being a airsoft company that happens to make a lot of the Resident Evil handgun replicas, sometimes even before the games come out, to help promote the upcoming game or next game within the franchise, have made a new Albert Wesker handgun. And while it is not a samurai edge, it is very similar in the sense that it has very similar aspects to Wesker's Samurai Edge, but it also is very different in the sense that it looks very Umbrella-esque. It has like the Umbrella logo on there. It has markings that specify that it's part of the Umbrella Corporation. So what I'm assuming here is that there is a possible chance that Albert Wesker is within the story or has some kind of part in this game's story. And I think that would be very interesting to see Wesker in more extended lore outside of just the mainline series, to give him more character development and stuff like that. I think that would just be really cool to see. Now this is the point where we start seeing some zombies, and one of the zombies seems to have some patches on their shoulders. It's very hard to make out what the patches say on them because it's very blurry and things start moving really fast at this point. But chances are that the patches are just security patches or badges in that regard. We do see at one point it cuts back to the person that's monitoring the characters, and they're typing into a keyboard, and it seems like they're pulling up data on the liquor. And that's at the point where the liquor actually pops out in the trailer. The one thing that kind of throws me off is that one of the things that I speculated about Project Resistance is that there's a possible chance that it was a Resident Evil Outbreak remake or an Outbreak File 3. If it's an Outbreak remake, what I don't particularly understand is that the keyboard is not a very 90s looking keyboard. It's a very modern looking keyboard, and that could just be an oversight, or they could just be saying, well, you know, it's Umbrella and they could afford fancy keyboards and stuff like that in their facilities. But to kind of take this back a little bit to the Albert Wesker handgun, the new one that Tokyo Maru is making, something to note here is that the Umbrella logo on the actual handgun is of Blue Umbrella being something that was featured in Resident Evil 7 and somewhat alluded to within Umbrella Corps. Now, Umbrella Corps alluded to Wesker being back from the dead, and while that game is partial canon, we do have to take that for what it is, and there is that possible chance that if the rumors that were circulating around back when Resident Evil 2 Remake had finally released and stuff like that, that Resident Evil 3 Remake was in the works and that Resident Evil 8 was also in the works, but they weren't really sure if they were going to make it a spin-off or actually Resident Evil 8. There's that possible chance that Project Resistance is confirming that rumor that this is that new game that's going to kind of tie things along with Resident Evil 7 and the lore that they've implemented with that game and Umbrella Corps. I don't particularly like that. Admittedly, because I hate Resident Evil 7. For those of you that have been following me for a while now who know that I don't like Resident Evil 7, don't particularly like that. But if they can fix the lore and actually make something really good out of it, then I'll give it a chance. I'll give it a chance and see how it plays out. Hopefully we can get something really cool out of it, and who knows, maybe we can actually get more out of the lore as far as like new stuff is concerned, and maybe things that can elaborate as to what the hell was even going on and what they were even trying to do with RE7 and the lore with that game. The other thing too I will say is that if this is the case of just, oh well, it just happened to be coincidental that they were using that stuff and they only did that as an oversight for the promotional material, you know, that again, that's an oversight on my end and me just looking into it a little bit too deep. But there is that possibility. The other thing, too, that I should probably point out is that whoever is monitoring these characters is that they are potentially collecting combat data on the T-Virus and the creations that come from the T-Virus, like the liquor, the zombies, Mr. X and stuff like that, which we will get to Mr. X in a moment. And what I speculate from that is that, well, like Resident Evil 3, in Resident Evil 3 we had Nikolai who was collecting combat data on the T-Virus and all the different mutations that were within Raccoon City, and he was going to sell it to the highest bidder. So we could be looking at a situation similar to this, where the characters are going through these situations and fighting through these zombies and lickers and stuff like that. And what they don't realize, at least in the situation that they're in, is that whoever is monitoring them, whether it be Wesker or a completely different character, they are collecting combat data for somebody else to develop a stronger variation of the T virus or some kind of new form of virus that maybe has strains of the T virus. After all, within the Resident Evil franchise, you have various forms of the T virus, especially within the Revelation series, where you have the T Abyss and the T Phobos. So there is that potential chance that we could see the return of the T virus within the mainline franchise in the future, based on the events of what happens in this game, if this game is not an Outbreak game, but just happens to take certain cues and aspects from the Outbreak franchise. At this point, we have the last bit of the trailer where we see the unknown figure again. You can kind of make out what his face looks like, but it doesn't really come up very clearly because he's surrounded by shadows. And there is another portion in the trailer where you can kind of see a close-up of his face, at least the lower half of it. But otherwise, we still don't really know who he is, but I'm still leaning towards the possibility that this might be Wesker. We also get a shot of Mr. X, and that's going to be very interesting to see how Mr. X is going to be handled in this game. Hopefully you can actually kill him in this game, unlike the Resident Evil 2 remake, but that's going to be something we'll have to wait and see on. And the really interesting thing about Mr. X, though, is that alongside the unknown figure, is that when the unknown figure puts on these like special gloves, it seems as though Mr. X is being controlled, and Mr. X's eyes actually turn like this bright red color, which is very unusual because it's not something that we've seen before. I don't know what this could mean. It could possibly mean that this potential mystery figure can control tyrants and other BOWs of similar stature. This could lead to some very interesting boss fights, I think. But that all being said, that was pretty much everything within the trailer. So we won't actually know anything else about this game until I believe the 12th, which is when they'll be showing off some actual gameplay. Just one last thing before I end today's video. I did mention that I would bring this up towards the end of the video, and that is how people are taking the reactions for this game, or how people are reacting to this game rather. And I will say that I know some people are concerned that this might be a Left 4 Dead clone, or that it might be similar to ORC or maybe even Umbrella Corps in terms of gameplay style, but I think that the trailer itself is not representative of what the actual gameplay is going to be like, especially given the fact that in the actual trailer description, Capcom does mention that it is a team-based survival horror game. And this is not the first time that they have done a team-based survival horror game, hence the Outbreak series. So I do think that people need to at least wait until we see the gameplay before deciding to jump on this bandwagon of saying that this game sucks or this game doesn't really feel like what we were hoping for as far as a new Resident Evil game that is still a survival horror game, but happens to have cooperative aspects in it. That being said, I hope that that is something that doesn't get people upset that I said that or anything like that, because it's like I said, it's one of those things where I feel as though people need to wait and see, and there is that gameplay coming up on the 12th, so just keep an eye out for the gameplay, and until then we could judge and see how the game will actually be like from there. But until then, I want to know what you all think down in the comments below about the trailer. Are you excited for the game? Is there anything that I might have missed within the teaser that I should have pointed out? And with that all being said, I will see you all in the next one. Matinee.